Your entire life, you've been told that there are two types of writing: fiction and nonfiction, true stories and not true stories. That's all there is. Well, I'm going to let you in on a big secret. Fiction and nonfiction is a terrible way to organize writing types. The whole system is a lie. Lies, I tell you, lies!
All right, get set for the story of my life.
Fiction or non-fiction?
Why don't you shut up?
Well,
Are you going to listen?
go on.
Okay, I might have gotten a little carried away there in the cold open. Ooh, I'm just gonna jump in here real quick. So, a cold open is this thing that you've seen in various forms of media your whole life, and you might just not know it. The phrase cold open is most often used to describe TV shows, movies, or video games that just start right into the story without any introduction. It's the part of the show that you see before the opening title and open credit scenes. SNL famously always starts every episode with a cold open, usually about something relevant to society or news at that moment. In writing, there isn't an opening credits or a
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
so a more appropriate term is in medias res, which is Latin for into the middle of things. A great example of in medias res is Homer's The Odyssey, which you probably read in ninth grade. The story starts 10 years after the war, with the main character, Odysseus, already a captive of a goddess. The reader learns who the rest of the characters are and how they got into that specific situation as they read the rest of the text. In medias res or cold opens are basically just a really drawn out example of the hook your English teachers are always ranting about when they tell you to write a hot introduction, hook, overview, thesis. It gets you interested in continuing to read or watch. Okay, back to the point. But organizing the different types of writing into just two categories is a really big oversimplification. It's a big oversimplification for works of fiction. There's mysteries and dramas and romance, etc. But in my opinion, and the reason I'm making this video and we're going to study this unit, is that it is an even bigger oversimplification for works of nonfiction. Nonfiction is an oversimplified term because it groups together too many categories, contains large, oversimplified categories of writing within itself, and implies a lack of creativity. So, sorry to interrupt again, but I want to point out something else that I just happened to do right there. I mentioned earlier that my cold open is like the hook in a hot introduction. But right after that, I gave a bit of an overview, that second piece of hot, of what this video will be about, defining that term nonfiction. And you might have noticed that I kind of had a thesis there at the end as well. I guess you could say that this video introduction has been pretty hot so far. But let's take a quick look at that thesis. It's a very simple sentence. It makes a claim that nonfiction is an oversimplified term, and then gives a few reasons why. And that's it. A thesis is the most important sentence in any essay, and is pretty easy to write if you follow that blueprint. Oh, okay. Now back to the video. Think about how many types of nonfiction exist. Literally everything that is ever written that isn't a made up story is a work of nonfiction. Memoirs are nonfiction. Documentaries, nonfiction. Biographies and autobiographies are nonfiction. TPS reports and office memos, nonfiction. Congressional reports, Tom Scott's YouTube videos, op ed pieces, and textbooks are all nonfiction. News stories are nonfiction. This video I'm recording right now, the script that I'm currently reading and that you are now in the future listening to, are all nonfiction. Hell, you could make an argument that the grocery list I made this morning is a work of nonfiction. Um, okay, sorry. That was a bit of a rant. I got a little overzealous and I might have even been yelling. I didn't even provide any evidence to support what I was saying. You should definitely not do that when you write your essay. Let me try that again. The term nonfiction encompasses too many different categories to have any real meaning. If you go to Google and search types of nonfiction, the results are the only evidence you need to see this point. Masterclass says there are 9 types. Indeed says there are 22. This Readsy blog says there are 24. Knowledge Quest and author Melissa Stewart say 5. There's clearly no consensus in the world of writing about how to properly subdivide the category of nonfiction. That masterclass article in those Google resorts goes on to explain that, quote, nonfiction is a broad genre of writing that encompasses all books that aren't rooted in a fictional narrative. Nonfiction writing can be based in history and biography. It can be instructional. It can offer commentary and humor, and it can ponder philosophical questions. If a book is not rooted in a made up story, then it's nonfiction. End quote. It is clear that nonfiction is a vast category that is too broad to have any real significance to its meaning. Wow. Now that is me doing a really great job at presenting information. The beginning of that paragraph is a perfect example of a tag and a quote. In research and literature class, tag stands for title, author, genre. And it is one of the 2 ways we are going to signal to our readers or listeners that the information we are about to share is someone else's idea. The tag is important because it properly gives credit to the original author, but also tells the reader where the information can be found if they want to read it themselves in the original source. All you need to do is check my works cited page and use the page number for my parenthetical in-text citation to find out that original source. Avoiding plagiarism and properly introducing borrowed information is really easy and very important. Ooh, look at that. Here comes a signal phrase, which is the shortened version of a tag used when referring to the same article for a second time. Watch this. Masterclass's article about nonfiction goes on to provide 9 categories of nonfiction, but several of those categories can be further broken down into their own multiple subdivisions. One group contains all biographies, autobiographies, and memoirs. Another contains academic texts from every subject: history, language, medicine, microbiology, every single discipline of learning, all at once in one group. A third category encompasses all of journalism, including newspapers, TV news, magazines, journals, and every other type of reporting that you can think of. Any breakdown of nonfiction quickly descends into further and further breakdowns, leading to confusion and a lack of clarity. Forget turtles, it's nonfiction all the way down. Oh, wow, that's a pretty good signal phrase I used back there. And astute listeners might have noticed that I didn't have any quotes between the signal phrase and the in-text citation. He must have committed plagiarism. Wrong. I used a far superior form of borrowing information: paraphrasing. Using my own words to describe the idea that the original source presented is often the best way to use information to support your thesis. All right, let's see about the rest of this argument. Finally, nonfiction is a bad way to categorize writing because it implies a lack of creativity. According to the article The Five R's of Creative Nonfiction by Lee Gutkind in the journal Creative Nonfiction, nonfiction can and perhaps should still be creative. Gutkin states that the creative nonfiction genre, quote, is a concept that offers great flexibility and freedom while adhering to the basic tenets of nonfiction writing and or reporting. In creative nonfiction, writers can be poetic and journalistic simultaneously. End quote. Although many people's immediate reaction to hearing the term nonfiction might be to think boring and dry informational reading, nonfiction is much more than that small box. Nonfiction texts can still use all the tools of good fiction writing to tell a story. Some people may argue that we must continue to categorize writing into fiction and nonfiction since there's no simple way to categorize writing in any other way. Whoa, 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 Mr. Kenyon, you're probably saying, why are you arguing the perspective of people who disagree with you? Isn't that against the whole idea of forming an argument?
No, 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 no. Silly child, no.
All good argumentative essays address some of the concerns that someone who disagrees with you might raise. It's called a counter argument. By addressing a counter argument and then refuting it in some logical way, as I'm about to do next in this essay, you actually make your argument stronger because you are showing you understand the opposite point of view and still believe in your perspective. Let's back it up a sentence and hear that counter argument one more time and see how I then refute it. Some people may argue that we must continue to categorize writing into fiction and nonfiction since there's no simple way to categorize writing in any other way. This is, however, an unnecessary distinction. As can be seen in that Reedsy blog article mentioned earlier, the language to describe all of these subdivisions of nonfiction already exists. Reedsy blog names 24 different categories of nonfiction writing. The terms to describe these myriad writing categories are basic terminology like history, philosophy, politics, essay, business, or crafts. If the language to be more precise already exists and it's obvious to readers what each category means, then why should we continue to use such an indistinct and vague term like nonfiction? Wow, what a great rebuttal. That counter argument has been completely dismissed. All right, time for the conclusion. Let's see how I wrap this up. Have your English teachers been lying to you your whole life? Well, no, probably not. Ooh, you see that callback right there? Remember at the beginning of this essay, I made a bold statement, a hook, that your English teachers have all been lying to you? Well, right here, I just called back to that statement to begin my conclusion. A good essay or any piece of creatively written literature for that matter should be circular. You start with an idea and then you end with that same idea. All right, let's hear the rest of this essay. But they have been categorizing works of literature into just two groups, fiction and nonfiction, when that's obviously a flawed system. The language to be more precise in how we describe works of literature and media already exists and is simple to understand. Describing the multitude of texts which fit into the nonfiction category with the same single term is an oversimplification that our society doesn't need to adhere to. And by doing so, we make presumptions about the qualities of many types of media and literature. If the tools of good prose and poetry are not limited to the world of fiction, then why should we continue to place artificial boundaries on any of our writing? You might notice there that the rest of my conclusion was just a restatement of the ideas I laid out through the body of the essay to support my thesis. It's really important that there's no new information in my conclusion and just a restatement of things I've already said. I made this video for a couple of reasons. First, it's obviously a bit of an intro to the senior paper, the main reason you have to take this class. But second, it's also an intro to the unit we're going to study over the next couple of weeks. We're going to read and listen to a bunch of different forms of creative nonfiction media. This will serve as a sort of inspiration for the essays that you're going to write later on in the semester and help you to think about the senior paper and papers you might write while in college from a new perspective. Remember, your essays do not have to be boring and dry with informational transference as the only driving force. You can tell stories, use poetic language, and write engaging prose while also supporting an argument with sound evidence from trusted sources.